Hi everybody, it's Grammy with a brand new haircut. And today I'm going to be reading Make Way for Ducklings. And the book is a little large, my space is a little small, so I'm going to disappear from time to time. Here's Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live. But every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. They were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles. So they flew on and on. Got a picture. And here's Mr. Mallard, who says, "That place looks good." And Mrs. Mallard, who says, "Oh no, it doesn't. Not good enough." When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. The very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard. So down they flapped. Here they are. And there's that little island right there in the public gardens in Boston. Next morning, they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. That's a problem. Here they are. See how they turn upside down when they're fishing? There you go, hiding my face. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer. But the people on the boat threw peanuts into the water. So the Mallards followed them all around the pond and got another breakfast, better than the first. So here they are, and this is what they were following. This is the big bird that they were saying hello to. And you can see it's on a boat with all of these people who were touring around the pond. "I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard, as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build our nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard had found a place that suited her. But what do you think the but is? Can you tell? There they are talking. It all looks very quiet, but over here, coming from the other direction, I see some kids on bicycles. That might be a but. "Look out!" squawked Mrs. Mallard all in a dither. "You'll get run over." But when she got her breath, she added, "This is no place for babies, with all those horrid things rushing about. We'll have to look somewhere else." Here's a picture of them with the kid on the bike almost running him over. So they flew over Beacon Hill and round the State House, but there was no place there. Here they are, flying over the State House. They looked in Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. Here's Louisburg Square, just this little place right down here. Then they flew over the Charles River. This is better, quacked Mr. Mallard. That island looks like a nice quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public gardens. Yes, said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. That looks like just the right place to hatch ducklings. So here's the Charles River, and you can see right here there's a little island right there. There's some sailboats. It's by a bridge. And Mr. and Mrs. Mallard thinks that looks like a good place to raise their ducklings. So they chose a cozy spot near the bushes, near the water, and settled down to build their nest, and only just in time, for they were beginning to molt. All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new feathers grew in. There they are. But of course they could swim. And one day they swam over to the park on the riverbank, and there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that the Mallards called on Michael every day. There's Michael, and there's the Mallards eating the peanuts that he gave them. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go to visit Michael anymore because she had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water or to have her lunch or to count the eggs and make sure they were all there. Here she is counting the eggs, making sure they're all there. One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like further on. So he set. I'll meet you in a week in the public garden, he quacked over his shoulder. Take good care of the ducklings. Don't you worry, Mrs. Mallard said. I know all about bringing up children. And she did. Here. Now the ducklings have hatched. And there they are with Mrs. Mallard, and Mr. Mallard's headed off to explore. She taught the ducklings how to swim and dive. She taught them how to walk in a line, to come when they were called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into line, just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. All swimming in a row, going to the other bank. There they waded ashore and waddled until they came to the highway. Ooh, highway. They're all in their line. They're keeping their line, but there's an awful lot of wheels on that street. Mrs. Mallard stepped out to cross the road. Honk, honk, went the horns on the speeding cars. Quack, went Mrs. Mallard as she tumbled back again. Quack, 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 went Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack, quack, quacking. They made such a noise that Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. Tweet, tweet! He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop the traffic, and then beckoned with the other, the way policemen do, for Mrs. Mallard to cross over. There's Michael stopping all the cars so that Mrs. Mallard and her ducklings can cross the road. As soon as Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to his police booth. He called Clancy at headquarters and said, "There's a family of ducks walking down the street." Clancy said, "Family of what?" "Ducks," yelled Michael. "Send a police car, quick." There's Michael talking on to the station. Meanwhile, Mrs. Mallard had just reached the corner bookshop and turned onto Charles Street with Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack all marching in a line behind her. Everyone stared. An old lady from Beacon Hill said, "Isn't it amazing?" And the man who swept the street said, "Well now, ain't that nice?" And when Mrs. Mallard heard them, she was so proud she tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra swing in her waddle. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was a police car with 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back the traffic so Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings could march across the street. Isn't that nice? Look at that. Four lanes of traffic, and they're stopping them all so that the ducklings can go across the street. Right into the public garden. Here they are going into the public garden. Inside the gates, they all turned round to say thank you to the policeman. The policeman waved and smiled and waved goodbye. When they reached the pond and swam across to the little island, there was Mr. Mallard waiting for them, just as he had promised. The ducklings liked the new island so much that they decided to live there. All day long they followed the swan boats and eat peanuts. And when night falls, they swim to their little island and go to sleep. And look at the ducklings still in a row, following their mom, and their dad's waiting for them on the island. And that's the end of this story. And if you go to Boston, this is a true story. If you go to Boston, you will find that there are little statues of Mrs. Mallard and all the little ducklings behind her. And you can go and watch those. These days, they're all wearing masks, but they dress them up in different ways. So I hope you have a great day, and bye-bye for now.